I'm shooting this a little differently. I'm messing around with the settings on my cell phone because I'm doing all these on my just shooting it with my cell phone. So yeah, onwards to chapter 15 entitled Cuphead Dunks a Duck. There it is right there. Free at the carnival? It sounded too good to be true. Still, Cuphead wasn't sure he could trust a pirate. They were a terrible nuisance on the water, and he couldn't imagine them being much better on land. And he definitely didn't care for those ducks. He looked at Mugman and Miss Chalice. What have we got to lose? Miss Chalice shrugged. Good old Miss Chalice. She had a real knack for getting to the nittiest part of the gritty. So as a group, the three of them made a quick, looping U-turn and headed back to the booth. Can I see the watch first? Cuphead asked. Beard smiled and lifted its hand from behind the counter. A beautiful gold pocket watch dangled from his fingers. It was even nicer than the one in Pork Ryan's store. Okay, I'll take a throw, Cuphead told him. Beard handed him the ball. He rubbed the cool white horse hide against his palm. Well, look who's back, said the Derby duck. If it ain't my old pal, Chicken Boy. What's that you got in your hand there, Chicken Boy? Don't tell me you laid an egg. The big-mouthed birds were in stitches. They cackled and clucked, and Cuphead felt his face turn the color of tomato soup. Meanwhile, his chief trimmer tugged down his hat and braced himself for the pitch. So, you think you can dunk me, do you? Well, take your best shot. Instantly, the dugout ducks broke into ball-game chatter. They said things like, attaboy, attaboy, put it in there, pal, and right down the old pike. You got 'em, sport. And no meatballs, Ace, just toss 'em a yacker and put some mustard on it. They were so loud and enthusiastic that if Cuphead hadn't have known better, they'd have sworn they were rooting for him. The truth is, with Mugman and Miss Chalice looking on, the whole thing felt almost like a real ball game. He pictured himself in a stadium in a front crowd of cheering fans. Now pitching for the Inkwell Ink spot, said an imaginary announcer, Cuphead. Go on, Cuphead, Mugman told him. You can do it. Cuphead snapped out of his daydream. Sitting across from him were the 5 ducks, each of them looking as smug as ever. He picked a target, then at the big red bullseye, and went into his windup. Then, like a cannon firing a mighty shot, he rocketed the ball across the booth. It soared through open space, made an impressive dipsy-doodle, and then clang! It nailed the target. The ledge opened up like a trapdoor, and the foulest of the foul plummeted into the tank, leaving behind a derby and a floating cigar. Help! Help! He cried, splashing frantically in the water. I can't swim! I can't swim! But you're a duck, Mugman reminded him. Oh yeah, said the duck, who immediately stopped drowning and started doing the backstroke. Look at me, I'm waterproof. Of course, his feathered friends thought this was hysterical, and all fell onto their backs and grabbed their stomachs and kicked their feet up and down before finally helping the wise quacker back onto the ledge. So what do you say, lad? Beard asked. Are you ready to win that watch? Cuphead wanted to win the watch, and he really wanted to dunk another duck. Still, it was their last quarter. For a dilemma as big as this, he needed advice, preferably in the form of a musical number, which was the style at the time. So it was a good thing the 4-mel arrangement just happened to be passing by. We hear you're quite a pitcher. We hear you've got an arm. Boom, boom, boom. We hear you're blazing fastball. Once set off a fire alarm. Alarm. Boom, 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 boom. Now all of us are hoping you take home that watch and chain. Boom, 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 boom. So dunk those ducks and send your birthday worries down the drain. As soon as the song was over, the little quartet disappeared, and so did Cuphead's doubts about what he had to do. You heard the Mells, he said. Give me the ball. The more he thought about it, the more Cuphead was convinced this was the right decision. And not just because it had come to him from in 4-part harmony, after all. How else was he going to get Elder Kettle a nice watch, or anything else for that matter? And if, in the process, he happened to settle the hash of a bunch of bad-mannered mallards, where was the harm in that? No, after giving it careful consideration, he was absolutely sure this was the smartest thing he'd ever done, and that was all there was to it. As for why Miss Chalice was frowning, he had no idea. Psst, she said, motioning for him to come closer. Cuphead waved her away. I can do this. Oh, sure you could, if it was fair, she whispered. But I've got a sneaky feeling this game is crooked. Just then, the booth rocked crookedly on one side until it looked like a sinking ship out of the water. Brinnybeard quickly picked up the slumping edge and stuck a rock under it, making the whole thing as straight as the innocent-looking grin on his face. Miss Chalice crossed her arms. It's just a coincidence, Cuphead told her, and he handed the captain their last quarter. He took the ball, rolled it between his fingers, and gave the ducks a steely-eyed stare, steely-eyed being the unfriendliest of all the sports stares. But oddly enough, the ducks didn't stare back. They didn't mock him or taunt him or egg him on with contagious ballpark banter. In fact, they seemed completely uninterested. They'd gone back to playing cards or reading the newspaper or smoking cigars or napping, just as they had been when they had arrived. Hard as it was to believe, this absolute indifference was even more distracting than their shenanigans. Cuphead put it out of his mind and focused on the targets. Each one had a red bullseye as big as a pomegranate. A good pitcher couldn't miss. This was a cinch. He went through his elaborate multi-step wind-up and drilled the ball at the first target. The pitch could have not been any truer. And just when it looked like a direct hit, thud! One of the ducks, the one behind the newspaper, stuck a catcher's mitt in front of it. That's not fair. He used a catcher's mitt, Miss Chalice complained. A catcher's mitt? I don't see no catcher's mitt, lied Brinnybeard. The ducks all whistled innocently. Next pitch! The pirate grinned and handed Cuphead another ball. Cuphead narrowed his eyes and bit his lip. He'd just have to try harder, that's all. This time, he twisted his arm until it wound up like a rubber band, then launched his screwball. It whipped and whirled and headed straight for the bullseye, and then... Tweet! The napping duck blew a whistle, and since he was now wearing a traffic cop's uniform and holding up a small stop sign, the ball screeched to a halt. A second later, the target swung upward like a crossing gate. The red bullseye turned green, and whoosh, the ball sped harmlessly underneath it. Hey, you said these were sitting ducks, Cuphead complained. Aye, they be settin', Brinnybeard said. Why, they be the sittin'est ducks I ever seen. Cuphead sighed. How had he convinced himself this game would be fair? It was a carnival, and carnivals were filled with liars and thieves, just like Elder Kettle had said. All he could do now was take his lumps. He threw the third pitch, which was batted back with a tennis racket, and the fourth, which was incinerated by a flamethrower, and solemnly held out his hand. Brinnybeard passed him the fifth and final ball. Don't worry, Cuphead said. You'll get this one. Big deal, Cuphead grumbled. It's the last ball. What are we supposed to do? Give Elder Kettle a tin monkey? If he doesn't want it, I know someone who does. Mugman beamed. Cuphead rolled his eyes, and out of habit went into the long wind-up for his pitch. He was just about to make the painfully pointless throw when Miss Chalice screamed, Wait! Cuphead froze like a statue in mid-toss. I've got an idea, she said. Mel, Melvin, Melroy, and Melbert, come with me. The four Mels popped up from behind the counter and followed Miss Chalice to the center of the midway. It was very crowded. Attention, everybody, she yelled. How about a sing-along? Well, have you been to the Inkwell Isles? You know how they feel about their sing-alongs. No sooner had the words left her mouth than a huge group of communal crooners came running from all directions. Everybody ready, she shouted. But I don't know the words, yelled a stranger. Oh, don't worry about that, she told him. Just follow the bouncing ball. Ah, the bouncing ball. Where would sing-alongs be without it? As you know, whenever synchronized songsters come together, lyrics appear overhead as if on some invisible magic moving screen. Then a big red ball arrives from out of nowhere and bounces from word to word to help everyone sing along. So it was no surprise at all when that very thing happened, as Mel, and Mel led the crowd into a merry melody that went like this. We singin' a swingin' song, bum, 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 bum. So come and join us and sing along, bum, 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 bum. Don't know the words, no trouble at all, just follow the bouncing ball. When the red ball struck the last note, it bounced right off the end of the lyric sheet and right into Miss Chalice's hands. She turned it over and peeked at the underside, which read, "Manufactured by Acme Sing-Along Company. 1,000 bounces in every ball." It's just what she needed. She rushed back to the booth, where Cuphead was still frozen in his pitching pose. "Sorry for the hold-up," she said, and put the bouncing ball into his outstretched hand. "Okay, go ahead." Cuphead threw the red ball as hard as he could, only this time he missed the target completely, an embarrassing blunder for anyone who called himself a pitcher. And the Ducks laughed, and boing! The rubber ball hit the back of the booth and bounced and bounced and bounced. It ricocheted off the first target, ducking the duck with the newspaper, and then it hit the second target, dunking the sleeping duck. It dunked one of the card-playing ducks, then sprang back and drenched his partner. Before Cuphead knew what was happening, 4 ducks were splashing around in the tank, and the only one that was left on the ledge, Derby Duck. But even though the ball was zipping and zinging around the booth at supersonic speed, the smug, smirking bird just sat there, smugly. He didn't flinch an inch. Finally, the peppy projectile made a beeline straight for him. Impact was imminent. Soaking was certain. But just as he was about to take one right in the kisser, he ducked, which, of course, is what ducks do. And the ball sailed past him. "Ha ha, you missed me," he squealed, blowing a raspberry with his tongue. "Why, you couldn't hit a bang." Poor duck. It seemed they'd forgotten one thing about rubber balls. They don't just bounce, they bounce back. The willy was a ricochet off the rear wall, goosed him in the tail feathers, and sent him into a swan dive. "No fair," Beard bellowed. "That's cheating. That's a hornswoggle. That's bonk." His speech came to a sudden and unexpected stop. You see, it turned out the ball had only used 999 of its 1,000 bounces, meaning there was still one left for the captain. He joined his crew in the tank. "That's 5 ducks and 1 soggy sea, Captain," cheered Miss Chalice. "Cuphead wins." "I'll take the watch, please," Cuphead said. Beard spit out a mouthful of water, climbed out of the tank, and made a sad, squishy walk to the prize case. And all the time he'd been operating the booth, he'd never have to give a prize away. Not this one. It was a shameful day for Carnival pirates. He grabbed the watch and held it out like a smelly sock he'd picked up off the floor. Cuphead took it. Just a second," the duck with the dripping derby howled. He crossed the booth and stood in front of Cuphead. "I never thought you could do it, kid, but you beat us fair and square. Just to show you there's no hard feelings, I'd like to shake your hand." He extended a wing, and Cuphead, who, win or lose, was always a good sport, held out his hand. When he did, the feathered felon quickly snatched the watch, flapped his wings, and flew out of the booth. "So long, suckers," he laughed. Cuphead couldn't believe it. He just stood there, staring in his empty hand. The watch was gone. Gone! He wheeled around and pointed to the skedaddling scoundrel. "Follow that duck!" Thus concludes Chapter 15. On to Chapter 16. Harebrained Schemes. It was a depressing turn of events. The dastardly duck had just stolen not a watch, but any hope of giving Elder Kittle a happy birthday. As the thief soared above the carnival crowd, Cuphead, Mugman, and Miss Chalice chased after him on foot. "Excuse me, coming through. Sorry," Cuphead said as they raced down the midway. "There he is! Over there!" yelled Miss Chalice. She was right, of course. Miss Chalice was an avid bird watcher and had a surprisingly good eye for hats. The duck landed at the far end of the aisle and was now running. The 3 friends were in hot pursuit when suddenly the bird veered off the path and bolted inside one of the large tents lining the midway. This was their chance. Like knights storming a castle, the unstoppable trio dashed into the tent and stopped. They had to. It turned out this was a show tent, one packed so tightly the audience had to take turns breathing. But the most unusual thing about this group wasn't its size. It was that it was made up entirely out of ducks. Cuphead looked around. There were ducks to the left, ducks to the right, ducks here, duck there, a duck everywhere, a duck. It would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. How are we to find a duck in here? He groaned. Easy, said a duck standing next to him. Just use a duck call. Quack, 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 quack. The crowd laughed. You hear a lot of bad things about ducks, but they appreciate a good joke. There was something curious about these foul festivities. Cuphead couldn't help notice that almost everyone was wearing a fez. And if there's one thing more unusual than a room full of ducks, it's a room full of ducks wearing bright red matching hats. What's going on here? He asked. Why, the convention, of course. You're in the International Order of Odd Ducks, Flock 158, said the duck. So you're not a member. Yes, I know, said Cuphead. So what are you doing here? We're looking for someone, Cuphead said. A duck? Asked the duck. Cuphead nodded. So I guess that makes you, the duck said, and paused for a second. A duck hunter! Quack, 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 Flock 158 screamed. Well, as much as Cuphead would have liked to stand around chatting with a bunch of joke-telling, fez-wearing waterfowl, and who knew when he'd have the chance again, he had to find Elder Kettle's watch before the party. He was running out of time. I'm going to look over there, he said, and paused his way into a friendly, fezzy flock. But just as he was edging towards the front of a crowd, everything went black. In a flash, a blindingly bright spotlight lit up the stage. The show was starting. Greetings, fellow odd ducks, announced a plump mallard wearing a novelty fez with an arrow through it. We have a heck of a show for you tonight by special ordering of the Grand Quacker himself. I present to you the amazing, the astounding Hocus Pocus. The ducks clapped and whistled and quacked, and when they got tired and then got tired and stopped because absolutely nothing was happening. Cuphead looked at the stage. It was empty. If this Hocus Pocus. God, some of these words are really hard to, pronounce. They use alliteration quite a bit in this, and I've always had trouble pronouncing that kind of stuff, so bear with me. Hocus Pocus, and hoped to make an entrance. He'd missed his cue. In fact, the only sign anything at all was going on was a quiet, rhythmic thumping sound coming from off stage. Thump, thump, thump. There it was again. He wondered what it could be. A moment later, an upside-down black felt top hat hopped across the stage and into the spotlight. For my first trick, the top hat said, I will pull a rabbit out of a hat. Cuphead was confused. Where was the magician? This trick seemed to be missing one of its most important pieces. But then a white glove stuck straight up out of the hat. It was attached to a long blue sleeve that appeared to be some kind of well-dressed arm. Then, in a very theatrical manner, the glove reached into the hat. And when it emerged again, it pulled out a pair of long white ears and a fluffy white head, and finally, an entire rabbit. Ta-da! The rabbit said. The ducks cheered. They'd seen a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat before, but never quite like this. Hocus Pocus might have been a rabbit, but he fit right in there with the International Order of the Odd Ducks, because he was, well, odd. He wore a blue tuxedo and a red bow tie that accentuated his deranged expression and bulging yellow eyes. But the strangest thing about him was his behavior. It was almost as if he were half magician, half monster, and you were never really sure which half you were watching. For my next trick, he said, I'll need a volunteer. 100 wings shot into the air. Who isn't a duck? The wings came back down. How about you? He said. Me? Asked Cuphead. Why not? You're not a duck, are you? No, said Cuphead. The rabbit raised an eyebrow. And you're not a chicken? Quack, 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 laughed the odd ducks. Cuphead frowned. No, he said, gruffer this time. Then what are you waiting for? The rabbit asked. Suddenly, Cuphead was lifted into the air and passed from duck to duck until he reached the stage. Hopus gave him a wicked grin. What's your name, kid? Cuphead. I'm here with my friends Mugman and Miss Chalice, and I'm looking for... Great, fantastic, glad to hear it, the rabbit told him. Now get in the box. Cuphead turned around. There was a long wooden box on the stage. When he crawled inside, his head stuck out, and his head stuck out of one end, and his feet out of the other. "Will you look at that? A perfect fit," said Hopus. "Let me ask you something, kid. Are you really attached to those legs?" Cuphead gulped. Huh? "Well," said Hopus, breaking into a smile, "we'll take care of that." With fantastic speed, he whipped out a large spinning buzzsaw. "Cuphead!" Mugman yelled, but there was nothing he could do. "And now, my fine feathered friends," Hopus proclaimed, I will saw my volunteer in half." And with one quick buzz later, he had done just that. At first, Cuphead was too stunned to do anything, but he wiggled his toes just to make sure they still worked. They did, which was strange, since they were on the other side of the stage. "Hey, what's the big idea?" he yelled. "Take it easy, pal," Hopus told him. "Pull yourself together." The audience quacked hysterically. Cuphead gritted his teeth and kicked his feet, and though they were nowhere near each other, you could tell both halves were equally angry. "I can't stay like this. I've got things to do. Fix me," he demanded. Hopus yawned. Yeah, in a minute, kid. First, I got a show to do," he said, and turned back to the audience. "Now, does anyone have a watch?" To Cuphead's astonishment, a duck with a black derby hat, the very same duck Cuphead had been chasing, climbed up onto the stage. He was smiling. "As a matter of fact, I do," the duck said, and held out the gold pocket watch. "That's mine," yelled Cuphead. Hopus took the watch. "My, this is a nice one, a real beauty. It was given to me by a poor old grandmother," said the duck. Cuphead couldn't stand it any longer. He kicked his feet until the box tipped forward, and when he was upright, the downstairs half of him stomped furiously across the stage. "It was not given to him by his poor old grandmother," his upper half shouted. "He stole it from me." Now the ducks booed. Hopus held up his hands. "Happens every time, folks," he said. "You put a kid in the show and he goes to pieces." "Quack, quack, 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 quack." The crowd laughed hysterically. Hopus strolled over to the talking half of Cuphead. "If I put you back together, will you get off the stage?" "Not without my watch," said Cuphead. "Fine, but you don't get it until I finish my act." "Fine," Cuphead shouted. With that, the magician grabbed hold of the box with the top half of Cuphead and rolled it into the one with the lower half. The boxes tumbled to the ground, and like magic, out fell a full-sized Cuphead, his feet and face reunited. He marched across the stage and gave the cigar-chomping duck a stare that would curdle cheese. Meanwhile, Hopus went on with the show. "How about this watch?" he said. "Does it have any sentimental value?" "It is my most cherished possession," the bird lied. "I see," said the rabbit, and he got to a wild look in his eye. "So I definitely shouldn't do this." Without warning, he pulled a large hammer from behind his back and whack! Smashed the watch to bits. The audience gasped, and the derby duck laughed. Cuphead nearly fainted. That watch was supposed to be Elder Kettle's birthday present, and it was destroyed. "Oops, clumsy me," Hopus apologized. "Oh well, let me just sweep that up." He took out a small whisk broom and swept the pieces into his hat. After a lot of pushing and shoving, Mugman and Miss Chalice finally made their way to the stage. They rushed over to Cuphead, and he pulled away from them, and their eyes were set on Hopus. "What kind of magician are you?" he snapped. "You busted my watch." "Oh, did I?" The magician reached into the hat, where he pulled out the watch, and it was completely repaired. The crowd went silent, as did Cuphead, who'd never been more relieved in his life. "Thank goodness," he said. "Jeepers, did you save us from a disaster. Now, if I can just have the watch—" "Not so fast," Hopus reminded him. "I said not until I finished my act, remember? And I've got one last trick." The rabbit grinned, dangled the watch in front of him, and jumped into the hat. Cuphead rushed over to look inside. The hat was empty. Appallingly, depressingly, heartbreakingly empty. Devastated, he turned to the crowd and began to convey the full extent of the hat's complete and utter emptiness. And that's when the 4 mouths popped out. "You almost had the watch, but didn't grab it. Terrible. I know. and now it has been stolen by a rabbit, big white rabbit. He's fluffy and long-eared, and now he's disappeared. So you can stand there moping in despair, deep despair, or get the hat and find the hare. A billowy puff of smoke burst from the hat, and when it vanished, the Mells were gone. I don't know why, but bad ideas just sound better in song form, Cuphead said. And without another word, he, Mugman, and Miss Chalice dived into the hat. Thus concludes chapter 16. It's getting a lot hotter out lately, and I'm in an apartment, and in apartments, this thing doesn't have really a thermostat, only to make it hotter, so it's only the end of May, but it's getting hot. At the time of recording, at least it's May. So for all you out there experiencing heat, stay cool, everybody, and have a nice day. Until next time. Thank you.